time for the Ron and Brian podcast. Get ready to fill your ears with the latest news, politics, current events, and whatever else we feel like talking about this week. And now, your hosts, Ron and Brian.
The champ is here!
All right, good evening, everybody. It is Sunday night. It is 8 p.m. It is time for the Ron and Brian podcast. And as you may have picked up already, I am flying solo this week. It is a Ron-only show this Sunday night. Where's Brian, you may ask? I mean, it's a touchy subject. Brian, as I think to no surprise of anyone out there in the audience, has become, for lack of a better word, unhinged. And I know it's tough to tell an unhinged Brian different from the normal Brian, but his obsession with this 51% ownership title belt that you can now see there in the background has just kind of driven him mad, and I think he understands that there's no way that he is going to win this title. He is not going to win the Super Bowl bet. So he went so far as to leave the country. Very sad. Was not expecting that behavior from him. He just really left a note and said, "I can't take this anymore. I'm sorry. I apologize." So we don't exactly know where Brian is. We don't know when he'll be returning. The last communication that we had was a photo. Let me see if I can find the photo that he sent to me here. So he's somewhere cold, clearly. He is scared. I believe he has wet himself a little bit in this photo. So we are hopeful that we are able to get him back by next Sunday's episode. If not, we will. I will definitely put out an ad for new guest hosts, and we will just go from there. But it's a sad time. I have my Brian coffee mug tonight that I'll be drinking out of. And initially this was a joke, this coffee mug, but now it's more of a beacon of hope. A hope that Brian is out there somewhere and that he knows that we love him and that he will come home to us sooner rather than later. So what I would like to do, I'm going to post this photo of Brian on our social media later, and I would just like all of our listeners at home to print this out, distribute it in your communities, maybe make t-shirts, mugs, pins, whatever you would like, just to really, rally the troops around Brian and show him how much we care. William Esquire throwing it out there. Ron and Billy is an option. Always an option. And then Allie, good point. We wouldn't even need to change the logo. I do think that would be my first pick. If I did have to replace Brian, I would look for someone with a B in their name. So Billy, you have potential. If there's a Bobby out there, I know we have another Brian that listens. That would be the easiest because then would literally not have to change anything. So we will, again, we will hope for Brian to return. We will hope for a return to normalcy next week. But in the meantime, let's start things off as we always do with Drink of the Week.
Drink of the Week.
Na zdrowie.
Salud.
Drink of the Week.
Pleasure.
Who's?
Drink of the week, drink of the week, drink of the week.
All right, so tapping into that Tavor crate again this week for Drink of the Week. This is going all the way out from Washington with Iron Horse Brewery. This is a little something called Mexican Cocoa Death. It says this dark chocolatey beer brings in hints of vanilla, cinnamon, allspice, and pasile chiles to warm things up as fall set in. And I'm sure I mispronounced that, but that's okay. So Mexican Cocoa Death clocking in at a solid 7.5%. Listen, the last time one of us had to do this show alone, it was Brian. He got drunk during the podcast. I might as well do the same and see how it works. So let's try out this Mexican Cocoa Death. Oh, now that is tasty. So not getting too much of the cocoa, but definitely getting the allspice, definitely getting the vanilla. It looks like it's a darker beer, but it's actually got quite a light body to it. I'm going in for a second sip. All right, so good beer. We will drink that throughout the night. I'm used to being able to drink when Brian would talk, go on his tangents, go on his rants. So I'm going to have to, obviously sneak a sip here and there whenever possible. So you'll just have to excuse me when I do that. Up next, it's our Beef of the Week.
Ron and Brian's Beef of the Week.
So Beef of the Week, I think, again, I don't want to kick a man when he's down, but we've been doing this show for, it's going to be going on 4 years now, actually 5 years this May, excuse me. And we're on episode 239, and you would think, when we're traveling, when one of us is maybe out of the country, we check mark off certain boxes when we pick a location that we're going to stay when we're traveling. And you would think, not our first rodeo, not the first time one of us has been traveling when it's time to do the podcast, that when booking a place to stay, making sure you have Wi-Fi at said location would be one of the things that you would want to make sure, one of those boxes that's checked off. So, some people do it, some people don't. And when that happens, sometimes you get a solo Ron show. So I'm sure Brian's Beef of the Week, the next time he arrives on this podcast, will be his roaming charges for his cell phone plan, wherever he is in the world, not being on Wi-Fi. So I'll be very interested to hear that when he comes back. So that's my beef. Brian, I love you, but that's my beef this week. What do we have here? I got a ton of stories, ton of stuff to hopefully fill this hour that we have here. But of course, we can't go much further without our NFL Locks of the Week.
Locks.
And we are in the final weekend of the NFL season. Normally, this would be when we would pat each other on the backs. Well, I have to pat each of our backs. Brian nailing a 2-0 week. He had the Vikings -3.5 at Chicago. Wasn't that close. Minnesota running up the score. And then Miami -1.5 versus the New York Jets. Jets had a hard fight, but ended up losing by 5 in the end. So Brian finishes the regular season with a perfect 36-0, a new NFL Locks of the Week record now that we have 18 weeks in the NFL season. And my picks of Tennessee beating the spread against Jacksonville and Washington beating the spread against Dallas paid off as well. So 36-0 for myself as well. Hopefully all of you have made a good amount of money on our Locks of the Week. We are still waiting on one more game tonight. We've got Green Bay playing Detroit for that final playoff spot. And once we see what the playoff seedings are, we will get you our Locks of the Week for next week. But again, always bet with your head and not over it. Last week, towards the end of the episode, was when we first learned about what was going on in the Bills-Bengals game. That was, of course, Damar Hamlin had collapsed, was given CPR on the field, used a defibrillator on him. His heart was restarted twice on the field before being transported to a hospital. And thankfully, it looks like he is going to make a recovery. He is conscious. He is talking. They removed the breathing tube a couple of days back. So we were very happy to see that. Whether he will play football again, obviously up in the air, but more importantly, that this young man will live. And one story that we've also been watching over the past week was a GoFundMe that he had started a couple of years back when he had started a charitable foundation for a toy drive in his area. Back 2 years ago, it raised about $2,500. It went viral after he was injured on the field. And people started to donate in his honor. And as of right before this podcast, we took a look, and it is up over $8.5 million that his charitable organization will now have to work with. So just a great thing to see, something nice coming out of a bad experience. Question from Allie: if we've both been perfect during the season, wouldn't it stand to reason you'll both be correct for the Super Bowl? Possibly. We have our locks of the week. We do bet in other games. We do bet against each other. Some of us are more successful than the other when betting those. The question that we still have to resolve is if we both want to take the same bet for the Super Bowl, how do we then resolve it? Well, we've done prop bets for the Super Bowl before. So we have to, we've got some things to work out once Brian returns from his sabbatical, wherever he is. Also, from this final weekend of the season, that class act known as the Pittsburgh Steelers, just 1 week after the incident with Damar Hamlin, decided that coming off of a touchdown, doing a CPR gesture on the field was for some reason appropriate. We'll play that video again. I'm sorry, not a touchdown celebration. This was after a sack on the opposing team's quarterback. Again, they decided to celebrate by one player giving CPR to the other. So great job, Pittsburgh Steelers. In the news this week, obviously one of the big things that happened is we had the House being taken over by the GOP. They captured enough seats during November's midterm elections to take over the majority and therefore have the ability to plant a Republican as Speaker of the House. They had said leading up to the transition that they would provide staunch leadership, which the Democrats, they said did not provide. They would fight against these backdoor dealings that are so prevalent in politics, and they would show just such the unified front. And how did they do that? They did that by a drawn-out 3-day process to try and elect a Speaker of the House. Kevin McCarthy thought he could just walk away with it. There was at one point 22 Republicans voting against him, voting for various individuals within the party, keeping him from getting to the 218 votes that were required to get him to win the seat. Democrats united behind Hakeem Jeffries. All of their votes went to Representative Jeffries for all of the ballots, which in turn totaled 15 after a late Friday night meeting where the final holdout, Matt Gaetz, voted present, allowing the ceiling that Speaker McCarthy needed to hit to win Speaker of the House was lowered enough, and that he was able to win with 215 votes. So I'm sure this gives everybody in the country a tremendous amount of confidence as we move forward. But at the very least, Congress can now be put into session. People who were elected, who literally were waiting with their families in D.C. for the past 3 days to get sworn in, have finally been sworn in. And now we will see the shit show that will now probably unravel as the clown car that is Washington, D.C. continues to roll along. One of the individuals getting a lot of press, but not in a good way, is a new representative from New York's 3rd Congressional District, George Santos. He represents northern Nassau County and northeast Queens. It has, since he was elected, it has come out a number of falsehoods on his resume, on statements he has made in the past just a quick rundown. He had stated that he attended Horace Mann Private School after attending PS 122 in Astoria. School has no record of him attending. He also claimed to have earned degrees from New York University and Baruch College. New York Times reported that neither school could find his name in their records, to which Santos then needed to admit that he never graduated from any college. His resume states that he worked for Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. Both financial firms told the New York Times they couldn't confirm his employment claims. At one point, he claimed he owned 13 rental properties, but changed course in an interview with the New York Post, confessing that he does not own any properties. He also, on his campaign website, stated at one time that he was a proud American Jew whose grandparents escaped the Holocaust. That, of course, belying the fact that he is Catholic and has no record of any of his grandparents being involved in the Holocaust. He said that his mom was a groundbreaking executive who died as a result of the September 11th terror attacks. She did not and was not. He also said that he employed 4 victims of the Pulse nightclub massacre. Also false. And then finally, he had said he had claimed to have founded and run a tax-exempt charity called Friends of Pets United that rescued more than 2,500 dogs and cats. Neither the IRS nor the New York and New Jersey Attorney General's office could find records showing it was registered as an official charity. More lies in the comments, of course. Yes, he had that great statement he said where he was like, "I'm Jew-ish, just not really Jewish." And yes, you know, his mom apparently died twice. Died a few years after 9/11 and then died in 2016 as well. So magical there. But he also made news again this week with a photo that was taken of him in the House chambers with him appearing to give the white supremacy sign. So the picture is up on the screen here. So he unfolded his arms to make a signal to somebody or to gesture, and his left hand was making the sideways OK gesture, which is a symbol that has been co-opted by white supremacists. Did this while casting his 10th vote. So this was the 10th ballot, which he made this hand gesture. It's again, it could be coincidence. It could be just poor hand gesture. But this guy is going to be undergoing an ethics committee investigation now that Congress is in session. Republicans and Democrats both seem to be united in their distaste for him and his lies. So we will have to see how that plays out. But again, like we said, the government is kind of a shit show, and we're just along for the ride. I'm just going to take a sip of this beer here. Talk amongst yourselves. See, Brian, this is what you've made me do, Brian, is I have to take drink breaks because you're not here to talk. I suppose I could play his little Clapton bumper, but maybe we'll get to that later. More shootings going on this week because this is the United States of America. This one was a new one. It was in Virginia, Newport News, Virginia, where a 6-year-old boy was taken into police custody after he shot a teacher at Rich Neck Elementary School. There was apparently a fight between the teacher, not a physical fight, a verbal altercation between a female teacher named of Abby Zwerner. We've got a photo of her here. Matt, if you can pull that up, please. So a verbal altercation. The 6-year-old boy took out a gun and shot his teacher in the chest. To the teacher's credit, she did work on getting as many students out of the class as possible after being shot prior to collapsing. Fortunately, no one else was hurt apart from the teacher. Her condition has improved, and she's now been listed in stable condition. But it's we've talked about gun control and gun safety. You have to think that the parents of this child have to bear some sort of responsibility for the injuries to this young woman. regardless of your stance on the Second Amendment and gun control or anything else, I would be hard pressed to find someone that would say, you know, a 6-year-old should carry around a gun unattended. A 6-year-old should be able to carry a gun into school because the only thing that can stop a bad 6-year-old with a gun is a good 6-year-old with a gun. Just absolutely ridiculous. So there's investigations going on. They have not named the child, nor have they named the child's parents. We will follow this story. We will see how it plays out. But when that news came on the air, when I saw it on CNN the other day, it was like you're shocked, but at the same time you're like, makes sense. It's really where we are headed as a community. Also taking place, a shooting in Northeast Washington, D.C., where a homeowner shot and killed a 13-year-old after claiming that he was breaking into cars. This happened earlier this week. The unidentified homeowner confronted and shot the 13-year-old, again, after claiming the boy was breaking into several vehicles. The boy was shot multiple times. There is no reports showing that the child was armed. They found the homeowner performing CPR on the boy when police arrived. Again, just, all right, so let's say the kid is trying to break into a car. You know, if you're a homeowner, obviously you want to protect your property, but to shoot and kill a 13-year-old child, and there was 2 other children involved in it. They tried fleeing in a vehicle. So the question is going to become whether any criminal charges are warranted against the homeowner. But again, it's going to be very tough, I think, to use anything like a stand your ground defense when you're out in the street. You know, if you see somebody breaking into your car, I don't know why, especially a kid, why you would feel the need to fire multiple times upon that kid. Maybe call the police, maybe try and detain the child in a non-violent way, even a warning shot. But no, this guy decided that he needed to kill somebody to protect his neighborhood. And again, this being America, he will probably get away with it. But that was not the most shocking shooting-related story of the past week. For that, we need to go down to Houston, where police in Texas are looking to question a man who was seen on surveillance video shooting and killing an armed suspect attempting to rob a Houston taqueria. The man was seen on video inside a restaurant called Ranchito Number 4 in Southwest Houston. We're going to pick up this video after the robber had walked through the restaurant and was taking money and belongings from the people in the restaurant. This is when he attempts to leave the restaurant. One of the people that he has robbed was armed, and this is how this played out. So you see him taking some money off the floor, and when he realizes he's robbed everybody there, he tries to leave. And the gentleman who has yet to be identified fires 4 shots initially after the robber goes down, fires 4 more shots, and then it appears that he attempts to take the gun from the robber, and a 9th shot is heard, unknown whether it was a shot from his gun or from the robber's gun. Lots of online questioning about this, primarily because, all right, this guy's defending himself, he's got a gun pulled on him. I think the 4 shots after the guy drops to the ground looks like it's resolved the situation. Again, we'll play this video again. You can kind of, again, he's got a gun. Yes, he's armed. He's taking people's money, but he looks like he is getting ready to leave the situation. These first few shots seem to take the guy down. After that, it seems like a touch of overkill. Again, Just my opinion. So the police are saying that, they just want to have a conversation with him. They have identified a person of interest, and they have contacted that person yesterday, although, again, they have not released any identities. But in the state of Texas, this use of force is apparently justified. Yes, I would agree with you, Janelle. Definitely excessive. So there are some that are saying that this was an excessive use of force because he basically unloaded a clip on this guy. But then there are many lawyers and people that have dealt with the court system in Texas and say, hey, this is just how it goes in Texas. And, he felt threatened, and therefore he had the ability to fire upon this individual many, many times. Good point, Allie. Waiting until the robber wasn't pointing a gun at the patrons was a good move. Yes. Firing so much, especially when he was down, was not. Yeah. I mean, again, I think you wanted to be sure that he wasn't going to get up and try and fire back. But again, once you're firing on someone close range and hitting them 7 or 8 times, I think the odds of that individual getting back up were pretty minimal. Brian, I know you would agree with me if you were here. You're here in spirit. That's why I used the coffee mug. What else do we have this week? It's just been such a great week in stories. I wish Brian was here. We have a bunch of stories that he loves, shootings and all that good stuff. Going back to an old school shooting, the mom of the Uvalde school shooter apparently has some issues of her own. She is now in jail for making death threats. Her name is, hold on, I had it here a minute ago, Adriana Martinez Reyes. Age 40, she was charged with assault and battery and uttering death threats last Wednesday. This was due to, again, threatening to kill the disabled man that she was living with in Oklahoma City. She had relocated to Oklahoma City from Uvalde after the school massacre. She spent 2 days behind bars, unable to make the $1,000 bond, but was released Friday afternoon after a judge tossed the charges. Reyes denied to the responding police officer that she had threatened to kill Alvarez, but a witness corroborated Alvarez's story. So why the judge exactly would throw out the charges is uncertain. Let's not forget, this is the same woman who defended her son for shooting up the school, saying that her son, quote, had his reasons for doing what he did. She was also arrested in Uvalde in June for criminal trespassing and driving without a valid license. So just a fun family there. We have a follow-up story, a story that we followed a couple of years ago. If some of you remember the GoFundMe scam that took place here in Philadelphia, it was a woman and her boyfriend and a homeless person. They claimed that she had run out of gas late at night, coming off of I-95, and this homeless veteran had given her the last $20 in his pocket so she could get gas and go home. And then we obviously later found out that that was a lie. Well, we have everybody's been sentenced up to this point except for the final woman, Caitlin McClure, the girlfriend in the situation, now age 32. She is already serving a 1-year federal term in the case in a Connecticut prison. Well, now she has been sentenced to 3 years in state prison for her role in the $400,000 GoFundMe scam. Her state sentence will run concurrently, and she was a former New Jersey Department of Transportation worker. She will also be permanently banned from ever working as a public employee in the state. Again, we covered this story. It started back in 2017. They pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud after they concocted that story with homeless vet Johnny Bobbitt Jr. Again, they raised $400,000, but then it turned out the money wasn't really going to Johnny as much as he would like, so he came out and admitted that it was all a scam, and all of them have done police time. So, and they've also been ordered to fully reimburse GoFundMe. D'Amico, who was her boyfriend, pleaded guilty in December 2019. He was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, a term also running concurrently with an earlier federal term. And then Bobbitt, actually, I thought he had gotten jail time, but he was sentenced to probationary federal and state terms. So maybe not rip off the public with the GoFundMe scam. Just kind of throwing that out there. It's beer time again. See, Brian's much better at this just being able to talk constantly without any breaks. Me, not so good. So that's why I think we work well. When Brian talks, it gives me my little breaks. It gives me my little mental checkout so I can arrange my thoughts and get back to things. So let's see, what else do we have here? This was... I don't want to make fun of people. All right, we do make fun of people. But we're going to show some interesting video here. And so this is, it's a story about 6 journalists who have been detained in South Sudan over the circulation of footage showing President Salva Kiir appearing to wet himself at an official event. The footage from back in December shows a dark stain running down the 71-year-old's president's gray trousers as he stood for the national anthem at a road commissioning event. The video never aired on television, but subsequently circulated on social media. And lucky for us, we were able to find that video. So let's take a look at it right now, shall we? There's the president right there, looking stately. If you look at his legs, you can kind of see the dark stain starting to become very prevalent, running down his leg, and then the telltale puddle running down the street behind him. He notices it. I think the cameraman starts to notice it, and then turns away to other people in the audience. The journalists who work with the state-run South Sudan Broadcasting Corporation were detained on Tuesday and Wednesday. They are suspected of having knowledge on how the video of the president urinating himself came out. It is unsure what laws that they may have broken. But again, this is the South Sudan. They're only supposed to detain suspects there for 24 hours before bringing them before a judge. But it is uncertain whether they've been brought before a judge. It is uncertain what the charges are. And it's also uncertain if and when they will be released. We'll also post that video on our social media in case you want to catch up on it sometime later. And I thought I had an hour worth of material, and I'm like blowing through this stuff like nobody's business. Like we're gonna be wrapping up early if I don't find some other stuff to talk about. So let's talk about a former Wells Fargo vice president arrested after a Air India flight. He became a former vice president because he had apparently urinated on a passenger during this Air India flight. So this gentleman is Shankar Mishra. Again, he was a Wells Fargo executive. He apparently became very intoxicated during an Air India flight in late November. He urinated on this elderly woman during the flight, was eventually arrested in New Delhi. Mishra, a resident of Mumbai, was sought by police for days in an apparent attempt to evade authorities. He switched off his phone on January 3rd and was using auto rickshaws to get around. Law enforcement officials were finally able to track him down on Saturday after he made a credit card purchase in Bangalore and gave away his location. He was brought before a judge in New Delhi on Saturday, where he was remanded to 14-day judicial custody. He faces charges of committing an obscene act in a public place, assault or criminal force to a woman with intent to outrage her modesty, and misconduct in public by a drunken person. Earlier this week, an Indian newspaper had revealed the contents of a complaint made by the 72-year-old victim to an executive at Air India. Again, she said, she was traveling on a flight from New York to New Delhi. A male business class passenger walked to her seat completely inebriated, unzipped his pants, urinated on her, and kept standing there until the person sitting next to me tapped him and told him to go back to his seat. After her clothes were soaked in urine, she was offered airline pajamas and socks. She criticized the way in which Air India staff handled her complaint. She wrote that they refused her request to switch seats, even though there was an open spot available in first class. So that's, again, air travel is bad enough as it is, but then you got to worry about somebody urinating on you. She tried to sit in an area where the crew was, but instead the airline crew asked her to return to her urine-soaked seat, which she refused to do. So apparently the man sobered up by the end of the flight, came to her, broke down in tears, and apologized. He then begged her not to file a complaint to spare his family. Again, don't pee on people in airplanes. I don't think we should have to say this. But don't shoot 13-year-olds breaking into cars. Don't pee on people when you're on the airplane. No matter how much you've had to drink. I think we've all had a few too many to drink flying on a flight. Don't pee on your fellow passengers. Let's see, what else do we have here? We've got celebrity obituaries. We were hoping to announce our winner of the Ron and Brian death pool for 2022. We have had some legal entanglements in trying to validate the results of said death pool. There is a group out there that feels that Brian should be the winner. They are claiming that Aaron Carter never died. They are claiming other people falsified their deaths. They actually held a rally outside the Ron and Brian podcast offices earlier this week supporting Brian. You can see the one woman there with the sign, "Stop the Steal." Stop the Steal. They're reusing that to try and stop the awarding of the death pool. People saying Brian won big. Now, granted, Brian got some points this past year, and kudos to him. I think he had a goose egg the last couple of years. Again, we have to kind of go through the proper legal channels to remedy this situation. But these death pool deniers, as we are calling them, they will not win. We will announce the official results of the death pool next Sunday night. We will have, hopefully, the winner of the 2022 death pool live on the podcast next week to talk about strategies, how they got to their win, and to get their thoughts on the 2023 death pool. So tune in for that. Hopefully Brian will be back for that as well. Again, I haven't heard from him. I thought maybe he would pop up here tonight. I thought maybe my phone would ring and he'd say, "Hey, I'm sorry I'm missing the podcast, but I just wanted to reach out, wish you good luck, tell you, keep your head up, do what you need to do, get it done." But no, I have yet to hear from him, and I'm a little hurt by that. He has hurt me deeply, but I'll talk about that with him whenever he reappears. But we do have a few obituaries to read. No one has hit any points yet in the 2023 death pool. We've had some young ones pass away. The first one, rapster Gangster Boo, passing away at the age of 43. We've got a photo of her here. Former member of 3-6 Mafia, Lola Mitchell is her real name. Recording with 3-6 Mafia, her first song with them at the age of 14. She officially joined the group a year later in 1994. Before she left them in early 2000s, she's worked with iconic rappers including Lil Jon, T.I., Killer Mike, and Gucci Mane, and was featured on a recent track by Latto that premiered just weeks ago. Cause of death remains unknown. Again, many people missing out on that 57 points right there. Also passing away, I don't know if we'd count this as a celebrity. It certainly would not have counted for a lot of points in the Ron and Brian death pool. But the father of instant replay, Art McNally, passing away at the age of 97. Number of games today, they honored him in passing. Let me see. Had his obituary here, and then the whole computer just decided to crash. So back in the early 80s, he invented this instant replay, which has really revolutionized the game. There was the very first play involved Jerry Rice and what was ruled at reception, and then instant replay showed that he had actually stepped out of bounds before completing the catch. So if you love instant replay in the NFL, if you don't, Art McNally's the man to blame for it or to cheer for it, regardless, passing away at the age of 97. And then earlier today, this was a shock for those of us who were kids of the 70s. From the TV show 8 is Enough, actor Adam Rich passing away at the age of 54. He played the youngest Bradford family member, Nicholas, on the TV drama, dying Saturday at his home in LA, according to a report by TMZ. The family did not share a cause of death. In addition to 8 is Enough, he also played roles in Fantasy Island, Chips, Small Wonder. Man, these are just some 80s flashbacks right there. And his last TV credit was an episode of Baywatch in 1993 before stepping away from on-camera performances for 10 years and then popping up in the 2003 David Spade comedy Dickie Roberts, former child star. He had faced some legal troubles for alleged burglary back in 1991. His TV dad from 8 is Enough, actor Dick Van Patten, once paid his bail. So somewhat of a troubled life, but sad to see him gone at the age of 54. And also sad that no one was able to cash in on those 46 points. So we will keep track of the death pool. We will keep track of the celebrity obituaries. We will be on top of this as much as we possibly can. Rolling through some additional news stories here. Aaron Hernandez's fiance has been accused of wasting his daughter's trust fund on clothes and entertaining. Aaron Hernandez, of course, former New England Patriot, committed suicide while in prison, facing trial for murder charges. He had obviously left a lot of his NFL fortune to his daughter, who is now 10 years old. But his fiancée, Shayana Jenkins Hernandez, has apparently been spending an exorbitant amount of her daughter's money on questionable items. The mother of two spent a whopping $17,000 in clothing, $10,000 in entertainment expenses, and thousands in, quote, self-care costs. Also spending $12,000 at Home Goods alone. That is an effort, because Home Goods has a ton of cheap shit. So to be able to rack up $12,000, I think you can buy the entire store for $12,000. If it's a regular size store. If it's a superstore, maybe not. But I think for $12,000, you can buy the entire Home Goods. The attorney of the trust, David Schwartz, began objecting to Jenkins Hernandez's reimbursement invoices in September after she asked for $10,000 for the trust to cover the cost of her daughter Abiel's competitive dance lessons. The court-appointed lawyer denied the request. So she was getting $150,000 annually to cover daily expenses, and she was asking for these additional funds. So now apparently we'll have a little court case, and it will determine, what's going to happen. The lawyer now wants to remove Jenkins Hernandez as the daughter's conservator, but she has in turn asked that he be removed as the trustee. So courts will decide that, and we'll follow that up. He's been gone since 2017. Now that would have been a death pool pick, dying at the age of 27. Even better than the Aaron Carter pick, which I also made the Aaron Carter pick, but we're not gonna talk about that too much. Brian's still upset that I scored that many points off of one death, whereas he had to kind of scrape to get the 15 points that he did get. Kind of a gruesome story from last week. An airport worker apparently who was killed by being, quote, ingested into the engine of a plane. This was a ground crew worker at a regional Alabama airport. He apparently was sucked into the engine of a parked plane at Montgomery Regional Airport. The airplane, an Embraer 170, was parked at the gate with its engine running after arriving from Dallas. The person who died was an employee of Piedmont Airlines. He had gone out, I guess, to do some maintenance on the plane and somehow got sucked into this engine. You would have to think killed very quickly, instantaneously. Just a brutal story. And then again, just the way that the news headline reads, I don't think you ever want to die being ingested by anything, but by an airplane seems pretty brutal. Another sip of beer here. How did Brian do this for like an hour and a half when I was down in the Bahamas is the real question. Because I'm dragging here. I got 14 minutes that I got to try and do. The band is legendary. Brian, you got to come back. Wherever you are, whatever ski slope you're on, whatever jacuzzi you're in, pack your bags and get yourself back home. FDA announced this week that abortion pills can now be offered at retail pharmacies. Mifepristone, the first of two drugs in medical abortions, previously had to be dispensed only by clinics, doctors, or a few mail-order pharmacies. Now, if local drugstores or chains like CVS agree to certain rules, they can provide it, which is good. You see with Roe v. Wade having been outlawed, access to abortion being restricted, the fact that women can have better access to these abortion drugs when they may not be able to actually get abortions themselves, it's just a good story. Yes, Brian did call me at dinner, but it's like, I'm not even sure what the time difference is, but it's probably like 3 a.m. there. And while I'm not concerned about Brian, his girlfriend is a lovely woman, and I would not want to disturb her slumber during their vacation. Brian, I'd wake that son of a bitch up in a heartbeat. But her, I'm going to cut her a little slack, and we'll see. That's right. Brian just missed Ron Moore, and it's 2:47 a.m. in Spain. I mean, I'm tempted, but again, I don't want to upset his woman. She's already upset if he ever brings this title belt into his apartment, which we know he never will. In fact, hold on. I said to myself I wasn't going to wear the title belt during this episode, but I am. I'm going to put it on my shoulder. I'm going to let it sit here for a while, let you guys kind of admire the sheen of the gold. And we'll go through the last couple of stories that we have here. A Colorado funeral home operator accused of illegally selling body parts and giving clients fake ashes was sentenced to 20 years in prison Tuesday by a federal court judge. Megan Hess received the maximum sentence after pleading guilty to mail fraud in November under a plea agreement in which other charges against her were dropped. U.S. authorities said that on dozens of occasions, Hess and her mother, Shirley Koch, who also pleaded guilty to mail fraud, transferred bodies or body parts to third parties for research without families' knowledge. U.S. District Judge Christine Arguello in Grand Junction also sentenced Koch on Tuesday to 15 years in prison. Arguello sentenced the pair after victims testified about the pain they suffered under the scheme. The two women operated the Sunset Mesa Funeral Home in the western city of Montrose. They were arrested back in 2020 and charged with 6 counts of mail fraud and 3 counts of illegal transportation of hazardous materials. A grand jury indictment said that from 2010 through 2018, the women offered to cremate bodies and provide the remains to families at a cost of $1,000 or more, but many of the cremations never occurred. On dozens of occasions, they transferred bodies to third parties for research. The transfers were done through the Sunset Mesa Funeral Foundation, and families were given ashes of those that were not their loved ones. They also shipped bodies and body parts that tested positive for or belonged to people who died from infectious diseases, including HIV and hepatitis B and C, despite certifying to buyers that the remains were disease-free. Hess's attorney told the court that Hess was motivated by a desire to advance medical research. Well, that makes sense. Why not just sell body parts and give people ashes that aren't their loved ones to advance medical science? Not quite sure of the logic of that, but that is lawyer talk for you. And since we are not doing our After Dark tonight, and that's right, we haven't quite plugged our After Dark yet, but normally Ron and Brian do this podcast from 8 to 9, 9:10, 9:15. And then at 9:30, almost every Sunday night, we do our After Dark, which is exclusive for our Patreon subscribers. That's a value that you just don't get from me being able to do it alone. So we've actually canceled our After Dark tonight. We will be back with that next week. Once a month, we also do our pajama party for our listeners. We held that last Sunday, since we didn't have a show on Christmas. Brian put together a Can You Beat Ron? And finally, after a couple months of losses, I finally came back and was able to win. So no charities received that $25 this month. So we will see what happens. You'll actually get 2 pajama parties this month. Because we'll do one at the last Sunday. Oh, that's right. We did the After Dark on Monday, Allie. Thank you for reminding me of that. The days just kind of go by. Next week's Ron and Billy After Dark should be good. Agreed. Or would it be the Ron and William podcast? I feel that sounds much more distinguished if you use the William name. I mean, I get we'd have to change the logo then. We'll kick it around. We'll spitball it. If Brian doesn't show back up, we'll try and figure out how exactly we're going to handle titles. Obviously, I don't know that I could give you the full 49% that Brian has of the ownership. Definitely cannot let you sniff the 51% ownership title belt, William. I hope you understand that because I love this title so much and will do anything in my power to hold on to it. But anyway, point being is this final story here is very similar to one that we would do on After Dark, and it talks about how now in Louisiana, watching porn now requires users to verify their age and submit state-issued ID. A new law went into effect on January 1st, which holds porn sites accountable for content, hold on. The damn website crashed again. Really hate the Daily Mail. It's great for trash news, but it crashes so often. Anyway, the new law went into effect, which holds porn sites accountable for content deemed, quote, harmful to minors if they do not implement age verification technology. This means that anyone wanting to view pornography in the state must now submit a driving license or another age-identifying ID card. Right now, Pornhub, our good friends at Pornhub, they always do things the right way. They are currently the only site requiring visitors to verify their age through the LA Wallet app, which is a digital wallet for Louisiana state driver's licenses. The law, known as Act 440, allows porn sites to be sued for damages resulting from a minor's access to such content, and is an unusually severe step in the series of government crackdowns in the name of child safety. Again, a very conservative backed bill by these same conservatives that don't want government intruding in their lives, but they'll try and keep us from watching our porn easily. It applies to any commercial entity that publishes or distributes such material on the internet from a website that contains at least 33.3% porn. So I guess maybe if you just cut it down, maybe 28, 29% porn, you're going to be okay. The legislation was authored by Representative Lori Schleigel, who has also advocated for legislation that banned transgender teens from participating in school sports in accordance with their gender identity. So gives you an idea where she's coming from. A couple good questions. Can Matt possibly change the logo quick enough in between Coke bumps? Probably not. He, again, still has his voracious cocaine habit. It's why I'm struggling here. I've been waiting for him to feed me some additional stories, and he has yet to do so. So I do not foresee him being able to change the logo. Allie, good question. We could change this to Ron and Buddies. Then it could be whoever we could get. I like that idea. Because again, then you keep the logo the same, kind of like what they're doing with the Daily Show right now. They're not naming a permanent host; they're just getting guest hosts and whatnot. Let's look into that. Also, I don't know how we didn't get to this. Has anyone else been seeing the insurrection currently going on in Brazil? I mean, they had their own January 6th today. At least 400 people arrested after charging the Capitol, and they had a breach by protesters. Just, again, the world's a shit show, people. And we say this each and every week. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And the only thing you can do to keep yourself happy is to listen to the Ron and Brian podcast, which hopefully it will be next Sunday night. It'll be Ron and Brian. It will not be just Ron. I am the champ. I mean, I think you heard it at the beginning of the episode.
The champ is here!
But I'm only so good. I need my tag team partner, Brian. So, Brian, I do sincerely hope that you are enjoying your vacation. He did want to do this podcast. He wanted to try and broadcast from where he's vacationing. And I said, God damn it, take a day off. Take a weekend off. I mean, again, he has taken some time off every time he's double booked his calendar. We don't need to get into that. We don't need to hash out some ugly things from the past again. But I said, enjoy your vacation, enjoy your travels, get a good night's sleep, come back well rested, and we will kick ass on the podcast when you are back with episode 240, which will be next Sunday night. So we do appreciate all of you joining us here tonight. We're going to wrap things up rather than just have me continue to run on at the mouth. Not saying Brian would have done that, but we're two different men. That is good to know. Allie's letting me know that Brazilian police regained control of Congress shortly before we went on air. Again, Brazil, crazy. U.S., crazy. It's a crazy time. So Brian is somewhere safe, though. I don't believe there is any insurgencies or any riots going on where Brian currently is in the world. So I feel comfortable for him getting back safely. He had a little issue with customs. I think I conversed with some of you earlier talking about the amount of contraband in his rectum. So he has hopefully learned his lesson and will hopefully try not to smuggle anything out internally when he leaves the country. But again, thank you for joining me here tonight on the Ron podcast. Again, we will be back next Sunday night for the Ron and Brian podcast. We will be back next Sunday night for Ron and Brian After Dark for all of our Patreon subscribers. Again, if you want to join us, go to ronandbrianpodcast.com. Click in the upper right-hand corner to become a patron. If you join at the bronze level or higher, you get to join us live Sunday night at 9:30. So we will be back with After Dark next week. We will be back with the main podcast next week. Thanks again. Love you, Brian. Miss you. And we will catch all of you next week.
Thank you for joining us on the Ron and Brian podcast. We're live each week on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can find prior episodes, links to our social media, and everything else Ron and Brian at ronandbrianpodcast.com. See you again next week.